Hello and welcome back to the Data Privacy Lawyer. My name is Funmi Owolabi and I'm the principal attorney at the firm. Today's review, we're going to be looking at a cookie notice. So before I click on any of the websites, I always make sure that it's the first time that I'm encountering the site, because generally that's when these banners are displayed to visitors. I'm a visitor of this site. I've never been on this site before, because I want us to be able to walk through what good cookie consent flow looks like for organizations. Now, it's going to be different in every geography. If you watched any of my cookie reviews in the past, we've looked at cookie notices that are displayed for US visitors. We can see above that this is related to Great Britain and Northern Ireland. I don't know if that's the only geography. One thing I like to say about data protection is it's not reliant exclusively on where the organization is headquartered. It looks at in which geographies will we process personal data, and the obligations on the business are reliant on who they anticipate will be a consumer and in which geography generally that person is a resident. For example, this organization appears to discuss Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Now, I don't know in which capacity because this is the first time I'm viewing the site. However, I am a resident of the United States. So the question for the business is, are you anticipating visitors in the United States? If the answer is yes, then you need to anticipate that there are laws that guide how you can process personal data in that geography, which is the US, and you need to look into what your obligations are as a business, irrespective of where you're headquartered. So we can see the word consent. This has a lot of meaning in the data protection space. Consent is a legal basis that businesses can rely on in order to process personal data, to include cookies. In some geographies, consent is the only legal basis that should be relied upon. Let's take a look at what the banner says. We use the cookies to personalize content and ads, provide social media features, and analyze our traffic. So let's look at details. So we've got those that are necessary, preference, statistics, marketing, and unclassified. And one thing I really like about this particular preference center is we can actually view all of the cookies. I think it's really valuable for businesses to consider having a consent management platform. The consent management platform being used by this organization is Cookiebot. The value in this is they're going to run scans that allow you as a business to understand which cookies are being collected on the site. So as opposed to having this be a manual process where you run your own scan on a periodic basis as a business, generally the consent management platforms are going to be able to capture what type of cookies are associated with your site so that you're obtaining the appropriate consents. Okay, so I'm intrigued about this because I've never been on this site. I'm not entirely sure what this alludes to, but it says January 12, 2026 was my last cookie declaration. And I wonder if that's in association with the consent management platform as opposed to this site. The one thing I do think is interesting is we've got deny or allow all. And you can see here that the buttons, one button has a blue outline, black writing. And then this one has a blue background and white writing. So there is a manner in which marketing is being conducted that influences how consumers interact with a particular site. This is not by accident, this color difference. And I've talked a lot about what is required for a good cookie preference center and a good cookie banner. If your business is looking for insights on how to conduct your cookie consent flow, look at my description below and I would love to speak with your business. But essentially, this is not an accident. And it's really important for businesses to know their obligations in different geographies as it pertains to what the consent flow can look like, specifically as it pertains to the buttons. In some geographies, the buttons need to be the same color so that they don't influence a consumer in any which way. The other thing I wanted to say was interesting is, in terms of our consent for all of these cookies, we only have the opportunity to deny all of them or allow all of them. We don't have the opportunity to perhaps opt out of statistical cookies but allow marketing cookies. So I'm actually going to deny all. You're going to see above that the necessary cookies are not those that you can opt out of, like Cloudflare and this Cookiebot. What I wanted to say about that is consumers should be aware about the fact that there are certain cookies that will always be collected. They should be necessary. Now, what a business defines as necessary is very important because you don't want to be collecting certain cookies on a consumer that are not actually necessary for the website to function. So not only is it important to list the cookies, but also provide a definition of what is covered. Now I'm just going to scroll down to the bottoms quickly. I wanted to see if there was a date this was last updated. The reason I always check for that is in some geographies, the date is really important for a business to clarify. One, because it demonstrates that the business is taking an active role in making sure that any personal data that's being processed is reviewed on a periodic basis. But in some geographies, it's actually a legal requirement, because then it demonstrates to the users what is actually being collected from a cookie standpoint. Let me explain. Most organizations are updating their website in some capacity. I'm just going to scroll down for an example, right? Let's say that the campaign changes, great futures. I don't know this business, this is just an example. If the campaign that's being run in 2025 is different to the campaign that's being run in 2026, and there are different features that are introduced as a result of the campaign, that may influence the cookies that are collected on the site, which is why this needs to be reviewed in tandem periodically as and when different pages on the site change. Because although we can see here that these are the necessary cookies, there may be times where businesses change, let's say, for example, a different web page, and it influences the types of marketing cookies that are collected. So that's really important. The cookie notice is influenced by other web pages. It's not just a page that's updated based on insights from the business. If there are different stakeholders that facilitate the changes to these other pages, but they don't facilitate the changes to the cookie notice, how are we as consumers able to reconcile what's happening from a cookie perspective on this page that's changed to the cookies that are being displayed on the cookie notice? So that's really important. You've got to reconcile what's happening on this site with this one. The other thing I think is valuable, and something that I see often, is sometimes businesses, this is what they'll do. Sometimes they will draft a cookie notice, but they'll have different iterations of the website. They'll have a website that is presented in the Netherlands. They'll have a website that's presented in the United States, one that's presented in China. If you're having a cookie notice, you can't just lump one cookie notice on all those URLs. You need to review each URL by each URL to make sure that you are making representations that are adhering to what is actually happening on the specific URL. I also think another thing that businesses should do is they should outline in the first section who the responsible party is when it comes to cookie collection. Just from looking at this logo, I'm not actually even clear what the name of this entity is. Without going to the homepage, let's go to the homepage. I'm presuming that this is the legal entity name, but when it comes to my personal data, if we go back to the notice, how do I, Funmi, know who I can reach out to if I have queries about my cookies and my interaction with the site? That's not clear, right? This website uses cookie. Who does the website belong to? And who can I reach out to? You can at any time change or withdraw your consent from the cookie declaration on our website. Learn more about who we are in our privacy policy. I think it would be useful to also have a link to the privacy notice so that we can reconcile as consumers what's being said there and what's being said here. Outside of that, I still think it's really valuable to look at what's happening with these websites. I'm not going to click on the notice, but I think it's valuable for businesses to not only realize that the privacy notice itself is important, but also the cookie notices too, because again, cookies are personal data. So I really hope you enjoyed this review. If you have comments or questions, leave a comment below and I'll see you in another review.